British Prime Minister David Cameron is trying to find ways to restrict access to Internet porn. Now, when I say that, there's a caveat there, and it requires some explanation. What he wants to do is make sure that the illegal images, such as child pornography and violence against women, is done away with, and that's a worldwide campaign. But it's also his goal to make it so that you would have to put yourself on a list, in fact, request access to Internet porn sites. As it stands now, of course, anybody can access it, sometimes even by accident. And so this is getting a lot of traction. A lot of people say this is a great idea because we don't want our kids coming across this stuff. And yesterday we talked to Brian Bowman, who focuses his law practice on privacy law and privacy issues. Now we're going to get down to the practicality of this, the nuts and bolts. Michael Legary is founder and chief strategy officer of Securus Inc., which is SECCURIS, Securus.com, the website. And he joins us today live on the Chorus Radio Network. Michael Legary, it sounds like a lot of things. It sounds like a good idea on the surface, but the devil's always in the details. Is this doable?
Right now, a lot of politicians, and he's not the first, and he's definitely not the last to propose this type of idea. But the reality is right now that the technology to actually reasonably and accurately do this and get the outcomes they want doesn't actually exist yet today. There's a lot of problems with the implementations that already exist, have been implemented in countries like China. And at a smaller sense, this has already been going on at a state level and even at in some of our provincial governments here in Canada, and there is rife with problems. So it just can't be done quite yet.
There are some who've said, look, there are already avenues for any family to restrict their kids' access to online porn, that there are already tools at their disposal. Are there?
Absolutely. There's, the nice thing about doing it at a family level is you get to choose exactly what, from a family values perspective, what you're trying to control. And the challenge with content blocking and any type of filtering technology today is that there's a lot of false positives. So it's going to block content that you want blocked and a lot of other content that you might want access to, or you might want to have your children have access to it in context, where you have control to, say they're doing a health research project. They want to access the site. They can't. You as a parent can go unlock the system using any number of software packages you can download from online. And then you can have a conversation about them as you go through the specific types of, an image of the male or female body for a health scenario. You can have that conversation, but you're in control. And the challenge here is that you truly are going to have a central entity for that entire country where no one will really have the ability to truly opt out entirely. So content will be filtered. You may feel that's appropriate for you and your children, but you'll never even have the opportunity to see it because once it's blocked, once it's filtered, the ability to figure out if that's happened is going to be very hard. And what we're seeing already in countries that have implemented this, if you want to get something off that list, either you're a company who got put on that list accidentally or you're a parent who wants access to certain types of content, you just won't be able to get through the regulatory body that's trying to do this.
Right, so this is not nearly as simple as it sounds on the surface.
No, and the other interesting thing, and this has happened before, and David Cameron is making exact same statements where it's not just about filtering the pornography, and originally he made some very hard statements originally about all forms of pornography. Then he realized that it's not going to be able to filter certain types like softcore pornography. So he started redefining what it means. And they also mentioned, which was very important, is that it could be used, that technology and the hierarchy that's going to be put in place once it's there can also be used to filter other types of content. And that's a very slippery slope where, once that regulator is in place, they're not going to just filter for pornography that it feels inappropriate, but certain types of software, news articles, websites. And as a citizen in that country, your ability to respond, it's going to be very difficult. So it's not just a technology problem, but a very key social problem.
Yeah, because we're dealing with, and you really hit on that, Michael. We're dealing with a couple of issues here. There's the social aspect of it, the morality, if you will, and there's certainly no consensus on that one when it comes to online pornography. And then there's the technical issue, and that becomes, as you said, as we said at the outset, the devil's in the details here. And so, when it comes to restricting what comes in or out of my house, I should be able to make that choice, should I not? As opposed to having to register for some kind of a list and place my name on a list saying, yes, I want to have access to this material.
Absolutely. No, if we're speaking Canadian content perspective, it's definitely something we would want. And the one problem I have with their particular system from a Canadian perspective is the concept of opting out. So you're this illegal, inappropriate, or morally unacceptable to someone other than ourselves content's being blocked, and I need to opt out. What ends up happening is that now there's a list somewhere on the internet that could potentially be leaked one day that says that your household has opted out. It's it's a very personally identifiable piece of information, and it's not necessarily as sensitive as your credit card information, but it's something about you. And in Canada, we like opt-in. We can volunteer to opt into the filtering program. That would be useful. Certain people make that choice, and it could be beneficial, but you know what you're getting into. Opting out is going to create a situation where you may not know you're filtered. You may not know if you ever get unfiltered, and if that leakage happens, a little piece of information about who you are gets out. And as I added in, when it's not just pornography, but certain types of political statements, certain types of other forms of content, whatever that may be, as that opt-out concept gets more detailed, more and more about who you are gets leaked on the internet.
Okay, but the door swings both ways, though, doesn't it, Michael? Because if I say to people who want access to this material that you need to opt in, or if I say to people who don't want this material that you have to opt out, we're all going to be on a list of one kind or another, aren't we?
True, yeah. The concept of opt-in would be to opt into the filtering service. So by default, your internet stream is not filtered, and then as a parent, as an adult, whatever context you're doing this in, an educator or a business owner, if you opt in, again, you've made that choice. There's still that exposure, absolutely, but at least you've had some control over that exposure, and more importantly, when I look at I'll call it the uninformed, you're being filtered now. And hopefully you'll have the ability to unfilter yourself if you change your mind in the future. When you have to opt out, as in Cameron's proposal right now, there's going to be a lot of folks out there who don't realize they could opt out, and that creates a whole other set of issues.
Yeah, well, and also having to you wind up on a list, and this is a real sticking point. A lot of folks are just not going to be able to get past that you're going to be on somebody's list, whether it's a government list or Google's list or just your internet server's list. You're going to be on a list somewhere, which means that some of your information is going to be available, and somebody is going to know something about your private life that you may not want revealed.
Yes, and you look at it from a technology point of view. What will happen is going to be that everything that they view in that country is going to be put through a filter. So what does that mean? There's going to be a central point of logging about everything you're doing on the internet, and it's all going to go through that one location. Look at Canada right now. That's not entirely the case. There's central points like Google and Facebook that, for better or worse, we're all going to. But you can make choices in Canada about using third-party browsers and search engines, and you have a lot of choice. The moment you put this type of filtering system in place, there is one point on the internet that all your information can be logged from, and we don't necessarily know who's going to be in charge of that. And especially in the UK they really haven't discussed who's going to be charged, what are they going to be allowed to look at, will a warrant be involved if they're investigating you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So that monitoring point is something that can cause a whole bunch of other concerns unto itself.
Let me ask you another question, Michael, and it has to do with some of the material that Cameron was talking about, which is, of course, child pornography, violence against women. We know that in China, that the government there has the ability to block a lot of things coming in on the internet. Why can't we all just block this stuff?
Well, there's two different aspects, and number one is simply that you'll never be able to block it all. And right now, like, China has an interesting program. It doesn't work for a lot of systems. So a good example is, as a foreigner, I can go into China, and I have a number of different methods of bypassing the Great Firewall of China. So it's not foolproof. And that's sort of one issue that we have to realize, is that this filtering system at no point in time is ever going to solve the problem. It may help if done correctly. Now, looking at something like illegal materials like child pornography, there are very specific identifiers that law enforcement agencies can provide internet providers, other folks, so instead of having to look at these images or material, law enforcement has these things called hashes. So they're basically they would know and identify this material before as inappropriate or illegal based on the laws of whatever country we're in. And then people can filter those explicit images, that explicit content. It works very well in the corporate world where we have full control of our systems. We can look for these images, the hash of an inappropriate file, and filter it from our company. On the Internet, it's a lot more complex. But what's interesting is it's called a hard line, where it's been known illegal in that country, and once you know it's illegal based on that hash, you could then remove it. And that would change it from just filtering anybody who's trying to access anything to making certain requests for known illegal material that, to be removed. And so it can be done. The technology will improve over the next decade. And the thing to watch will be, is there appropriate visibility, transparency, and recourse to ensure that list, that filtering and blocking list, that hash list is appropriate and it is being managed well.
Michael, thanks very much for all the info.
Absolutely. Take care.
Michael Legary is founder and chief strategy officer for Securus Inc. It's on the website, securus.com. That's SECCURIS. Jeff Courier for Charles Adler and the Chorus Radio Network.